Did you see the stylish kids in the...
Welcome to the Young IPA podcast. I'm James. This is Adam.
G'day.
Back again for another week.
Yep.
Pete is back, I think, tomorrow. I probably should know that as the host of the show, co-host of the show. But Pete back tomorrow. He's back next week. So Adam, thank you for joining us. It's your last week. We'll get into that. Super fun show for you guys coming up. We are going to be talking to Matthew Lesh again, the head of research over at the Adam Smith Institute. Been a whole 2 weeks since he's been on the show. We've missed him terribly. But we're going to be talking to him about this issue that just gets bigger and bigger every day of academic freedom and free speech at Australian campuses in the wake of Confucius Centres, and now with these pro-Hong Kong protests that are starting to get shut down and stuff like that. So I'm going to be talking to Adam about all that stuff. We're also going to be talking to, this was fun, a young entrepreneur from Queensland, Henry Spinks. He tried to get a car company, basically a chauffeur business, off the grounds, ran into all this government red tape. So I'm going to be talking about that with him. Also got the quiz. We're going to be talking about press freedom, the cash ban, anything that on the list that you're particularly looking forward to, Adam?
Well, there's a fair bit. We've got QANTAS and their climate change endeavours.
Endeavours is a good word.
We've got some good culture picks this week.
We do indeed. All right.
It's going to be good.
Yeah. So fun show. Let's get into it. So I think the big story this week, especially for what the IPA talks about, was that the press freedom inquiry started. So this was a thing that got announced in the wake of the AFP raids on the ABC and all the stuff that went down over there. So the inquiry started. And it's interesting because we've got all these media executives talking about the need for free speech and the need for freedom of the press. And it's a relief to finally hear the media en masse call for more freedom of speech, which doesn't usually fit the narrative of what goes on in the freedom of speech discussion in Australia.
It's nice to hear.
Yeah,
it's refreshing.
It is good. So finally we can talk about, hey, what should people talk about openly and what should the government crack down on, or shouldn't the government crack down on? But the one thing that, the IPA thinks about this and that I think about this is like, it's all, it's awesome that we're talking about press freedom. Mm-hmm. It's awesome that we're having an inquiry to say, how can we make this stronger? But it's another thing that, the press sort of turns away from other freedom of speech issues like 18C and a few of these other things. They just don't want to talk about that. They want the press freedom for themselves, but when you talk about the comments that get posted on the articles, that's the kind of stuff that they go,
which makes no sense.
Not so sold on. So it's going to be really interesting. The IPA put out a media release on it a while ago talking about the need for more freedom of speech. So you can go to, it's on the screen now for people who are watching on YouTube. You can go to ipa.org.au to read all that there. So it's awesome to think about, but all I can see happening is that the the inquiry is going to come back with recommendations that will stop the AFP ever rating the ABC again, but that'll be it.
I'm kind of worried we're going to get this kind of watered down version of freedom of speech. Like, what a lot of the left think is freedom of speech, kind of not that far from what we've got now. We've got laws like 18C stuff in now, and I'm worried we're just going to get a bit more of that, and they're going to call it freedom of speech and say, there you go, that's it.
I hope I'm wrong, but I never am. So that's the thing we're going to have to deal with.
Inconvenient.
All right. Now, Adam, you want to talk to us about this cash ban?
So it came up that the government apparently is trying to push legislation which will ban cash transactions over $10,000 in order to prevent tax and money laundering and criminal activity. And there's a pretty hefty fine for it. It's a punishment of 2 years jail or $25,000 fine. And I guess, my take on it is no one blames them for trying to stop criminal activity. As IPA fellow Matthew Lesh says, they're genuine goals. But what we can blame them for is how they're doing it. Like, this is a huge invasion of our privacy. And I guess on top of that as well, I can't really see it working. Criminals who are, doing all this stuff, this isn't going to stop them. They're not scared. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to be the person that has to tell the government about cryptocurrency, mainly because I don't quite understand it myself. Yeah. But that is a thing that criminals will be using, or they will find a way to do crime. Yeah. And they're already, the stuff they're doing's already got, hefty punishments on it. A $25,000 fine they're not going to, quit shop and just leave. Well, it's like, all right, fine, let's go back to legal business. It's exactly. It's like it's gonna
infringe on a lot of freedoms for regular Australians and is not going to do a whole lot to stop criminal activity. But as a holder of some Bitcoin still, it's been a few years. It's been some bad few years.
Hold on to it. You never know.
Any further movements that governments want to make that's going to incentivize people to adopt Bitcoin and make me rich, I am fully in support of. So
even if it's criminals.
If it's philosophically, I'm against the government cracking down on this, but practically for my own back pocket, I like this.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Very tumultuous time.
A well-rounded
in my head.
Argument on your side.
Yeah, exactly. I win either way.
Yeah,
which
good.
is how I like to put these things. Cool. So yeah, if you wanted to learn more about that, go to our Facebook page. So we had, as Adam said, Matthew Lesh talked about it, as did Kurt Wallace, and we shared all that on our Facebook page. So if you do want to learn more about the cash ban, go to the Facebook page. All right. So the third one I want to talk about, which you brought up earlier in the show. So a few years ago, 2016 to be precise, Alan Joyce, who's the CEO of QANTAS, gave a big speech talking about the challenges that climate change poses to airline travel. And he talks about how there are 50 years of proven fossil fuels left. Airlines are the first industry to voluntarily agree to sectoral change to climate change. So he's all on board.
Yep.
Until it gets to hurt his back pocket, because now he's come out this week and he said we should cut back on flight shaming. That's a direct quote, flight shaming, and says we don't need taxes on additional flight travel. Now, this is coming on the heels of there's a few movements about it, because I think, France has last month announced an eco tax on all flights from French airports, which would raise $300 million a year. So Alan Joyce, all about talking about climate change until it's going to hurt the business. And then he's like, whoa, guys, let's not flight shame.
Let's take it back a little bit.
Yeah, I thought we were out on shaming as a society. We don't need a flight shame.
Yeah, no, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I like how pretty much we talk about this. You weren't on the show, but Pete and I were talking about this when David Attenborough said we need to cut back on flights or make it more expensive to have flights. And then people get into this when they say we need to divest from exporting coal to poor nations. It's like, can you guys come up with a concept that stops emissions rising that doesn't also make life suck for poor people?
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. I think we've come to the conclusion that we can't get rid of all emissions, right?
Yeah.
There are some things that, are just part of our, our world now that we can't get rid of. And I think flights have come to be one of those things, People need to fly places. It's important to our economy, important for our business.
Yeah, and if you raise the taxes on it, rich people are still going to be able to fly.
Yeah.
It's the poor people that are going to be like,
life
it's becoming too expensive. I don't want to do it. And they don't get to improve their lives.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, what people are always arguing for is how do we make the lives of, less well-off people better? But yet they're still coming up with ways to make it harder.
You're going to have to make a choice. All right, we should get on to our Heroes and Villains segment. So the Grunt the Pig Freedom Award, for people that don't know. One of our favourite segments here. So basically people that have stood up for freedom, stood up for liberty, as would Grunt the Pig, famous pig. Go back in the history of the show if you want to read more about the pig. So first off, I want to update from last week. So last week I shared the tale of Nancy Segula, who was my my hero of the week for freedom, who would not stop feeding stray cats in her area, and she was sentenced to jail time. So update, no jail time. The judges have overruled that, but she's been giving another citation, and should she violate the order, she would be going to jail. And Adam, if I may predict,
which is what happened last time.
It's going to happen again.
Yeah, last time they said, if you do it one more time, we'll send you to jail.
Look, spoiler alert, that woman is about to feed some stray cats at celebration.
She might even feed some more.
Yeah. She's going to have a big party at her house.
She might move on to dogs as well.
She's wild. But anyway, this week's Hero of the Week award, Sarah Silverman, famous comedian, big fan. So Sarah Silverman was on the Bill Simmons podcast, one of my favorite ones, by the way, and she was talking about how she recently got fired from a movie because the producers found a sketch from 2002, I think it is, where she wore blackface for a sketch. And they said, okay, we can't be with you, so you're fired from the movie. So the thing is now that I get from this is that no comedian can have ever made a mistake in the history of their lives. You see, Kevin Hart gets fired from the Oscars for tweets he made how long ago. Sarah Silverman gets fired for a sketch from 2002. It's you can't be trusted to be funny.
Yeah.
Unless you have a completely spotless record of never offending anyone.
And a complete idea of, what's going to be offensive in the future in 10 years. You've got to have all of that in mind if you want to be a comedian. No matter how much you apologize, no matter how many other causes you attach yourself to, if we find one thing that we don't like, you're gone. Yeah.
And that's just the way
comedians
society is
need to be
right
able
now.
to see the future.
So Exactly. So Sarah Silverman says a really cool quote here. So she says, I think it's really scary and it's a very odd thing that's invaded the left primarily. The right will mimic it. Righteousness porn. It's like if you're not on board, if you say the wrong thing, if you had a tweet once, everyone's like throwing the first stone. Look how righteous, everyone's saying, look how righteous I am. And now I'm going to press refresh all day long to see how many likes I can get in my righteousness, which is exactly the culture. It's like, look, I am going to yell at a celebrity and everyone's going to know how good I am because I did that.
Yep, no, I agree.
Yep. Sorry, Sarah Silverman, that is my hero of the week.
All right, nice one.
Right. Thank you, Adam. I appreciate the kind words.
All right, well, my one is a much broader
Yeah.
group. As we mentioned last week, we talked about the protesters in Hong Kong and, you know, what they're going through and what they're doing. And a video came up this week of them all singing the song Do You Hear the People Sing from Les Mis, if you know it. Yeah. And it was a nice sight to see, a very, you know...
Yeah, in a sea of very concerning videos coming out of Hong Kong, this is one where you're like,
the nicest one.
That's awesome. All right, so I think we'll play it now. Yeah, so for people that are like listening and not watching on our YouTube channel, so if you're like listening on your phone, there is like 1,000 people singing that in the airport. It is a huge thing.
I kind of want to know, do you think they learnt the words for this protest?
Yep.
Or did they already know the words? Did they have so much time while they were protesting that they could learn the words?
I don't know. I think it's a pretty universally known song. I know Saul, who's manning the tech test today, had absolutely no idea which the chorus was. So, yeah, it could be any one of those things. All right, so we'll now cut it over to the villain segment. So this is for people that have not stood up for heroism. They've stood for tyranny. This is a Walter Peck Freedom Award. And I want to nominate Gwent Police. Now, this is a story that went pretty viral. So Gwent Police over in the UK, a drug dealer was on the loose. So they put up a photo of the drug dealer on Facebook and said, if anyone knows where he is, can you make a comment? Now, for people that are watching on YouTube, and hopefully people know exactly what I'm talking about, but this guy's haircut is out of control. The man is completely bald except for the very back part of his head, which seems to be in like 2 spikes. So he looks like he's got bunny ears on, but it's just his hair. It's wild. So 89,000 comments later, like the internet has gone off this guy. But anyway, so that should be it. It's like, hey, we try to find a drug dealer. Here's a hilarious mugshot. The internet's going to internet, and that should be it.
And it's good. You know, it's got his face around. Hopefully someone will spot
exactly. We've raised awareness. Like people are now aware that guy is there and that he's on the loose and that he's a potential drug dealer. So Gwent Police decided that it was not all done, and they put up a comment saying, our advice is to be as careful in social media as you would in any other form of communication. If you say something about someone which is grossly offensive or is of an indecent, obscene, or menacing character, then you could be investigated by the police. Like,
just like this guy.
Exactly. Like, shouldn't you be finding that guy?
Yeah.
Shouldn't you be finding the drug dealer?
Him. And I don't know that these people commenting should be on the same level.
Yeah, exactly. And if there's one thing that's definitely not going to stop an internet pile-on, it's the police asking people to stop commenting.
Yeah, I don't think they're not fussed about the police.
All right, so Gwent Police, that is my nomination for the Howard Peck Villain Award. Sorry, Adam,
all right.
You've got one?
My one. So there was a senior civil servant from the Northern Ireland office in Belfast recently who just got paid $10,000 in compensation. And because he had to walk past portraits of the Queen every day, and he said that breached his human rights. As a result, all the portraits have been taken down.
Yep.
And he's $10,000. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So the guy's name's Lee Haggerty, and as you said, just like my human right is to not walk past the Queen every day.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah. So I just thought instead of the government giving him $10,000, I thought a few other things would be to recommend that he take a different route if he doesn't like walking past the Queen. Maybe avert your eyes to the floor
not look
as you walk, or where
he knows where it is.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't be surprised day.
They're not
in,
putting
day
surprise
out.
pictures of the Queen, in the bathroom stalls.
They move it every day just to screw this guy. It's like, too late. No, you saw it. It's there every day. You know exactly where it is, and you know that it's going to offend you. Don't go there. Don't look at it.
And I don't know, like most pictures of the Queen, I haven't seen any that are particularly offensive. They're usually quite reserved.
Yeah,
very,
exactly. She's not exactly wearing a shirt that's going to have an offensive slogan on it. Or
there's no violence.
Yeah,
in it.
exactly. And again, it's the office in Northern Ireland, not Ireland. Like, she is the Queen of Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
That's not going away anytime soon. So yeah, interesting story. All right, that is it for the start of the show. We're now going to go to our interviews with Matthew Lesh and Henry Spinks. So yeah, we're going to be talking to Matthew all about freedom of speech on campus, and Henry about his problems with government red tape. Let's go to those now. Okay, we now welcome onto the show via Skype the head of research at the Adam Smith Institute and adjunct fellow of the Institute of Public Affairs, Matthew Lesh. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so it's been a full 2 weeks since you were last on. We've missed you terribly here on the show. Any major life updates you want to tell us about in these last 2 weeks? Maybe any updates on Brexit?
It's been a roller coaster of emotions these 2 weeks. It's actually what in the UK, but I suppose even more so in Europe, is August is a dead month. It feels like basically everyone's left town, everything's quiet, the weather's nice, it's kind of good relaxing. I did see the Australian men's cricket team last night, our Ashes Test 1 victory, and in the same room there was also maybe some major cricket fans, like former Prime Minister John Howard, also there with Peter Costello. I don't think I saw them talk during the evening, but they were certainly both very close to each other. And yeah, it was good to be able to celebrate with a bunch of the Brits all getting photos with the Australian cricket team, so it was quite funny.
Yeah, because I know you are a huge cricket tragic, so were you able to tell any of the players on the stage? I know you could tell every single politician in the room.
I could spot most of the politicians and none of the players, but they were all wearing their formal wear, so that they were pretty recognisable. Yeah,
fantastic. All right. I want to talk to you about a bunch of things, but it's going to come down to the one theme, which is freedom of speech on campus and the influence of the CCP, the Communist Party. And first off, Confucius Centres, they were sort of a niche political story, and they're now becoming quite popular and quite influential as a news story. So why don't we get into what is a Confucius Centre? Just let's start there.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the Confucius Centres, I think it's right that they're starting to grab a little bit more attention in this story about how the Chinese Communist Party does its global influence. So the Confucius Centres are technically billed as kind of culture and language centres, providing education to universities either by providing courses formally through the university or additional educational opportunities. Technically, they're designed again, to promote the general cultural understanding of China. But there's a bit of a smelly undertone here, which is that they're all funded and controlled by what's called the Hanban, which is an organization in China that is owned and fully funded by the Ministry of Education. And it's the Chinese officials and propaganda officials have admitted in the past that they are part of the kind of global propaganda effort of the regime, in a sense. And what these centres do is they strategically focus in on culture, on language, on a purely positive perspective of China, and in a very non-critical way. There'll be no discussion of Tiananmen Square, of China's lack of democracy, of what's going on in Hong Kong. They're purely designed to hide away anything negative about China and put forward a purely positive world view. And the nature of them as well is the fact that they're actually, in terms of who the directors are, one of the directors will be an Australian university appointed director. So the Confucius Centres actually based at the universities. There's about 11 based universities in Australia, including universities like the University of Melbourne, University of Queensland, University of Sydney, or basically all the top universities, or many of the top universities in Australia. So they'll have these one kind of locally appointed director, but they'll also have effectively a Chinese state appointed director, somebody who's appointed by the Hanban. And I think there's evidence of how these centres are used in coordination with local diplomatic efforts in Australia, in other places. There's even one Confucius Centre, I think this is quite bizarre, integrated into the New South Wales Department of Education, trying to create Chinese educational opportunities in New South Wales schools, not even higher education, but in schools. And I think it's quite bizarre. I suspect the motivation of the universities to some extent is the fact that they are funded. It's a cheap way to get Chinese language skills and Chinese connections into the university. But I do worry that they're potentially compromising the academic independence of the university, and the links that they contain can be problematic.
Yeah, so what is the relationship between these Confucius Centres and universities? Is it like a strong level of funding? Do we know any of this stuff?
So it's not precisely clear because the contracts actually, for the most part, between the Confucius Centres and the universities haven't been released. So we're not often going to know precisely how they're funded. I think they're largely funded by the Chinese government through the Hanban. There might also be some domestic funding that's used to support it as well. But it's one of these things that's not exactly clear and isn't very well publicised, which I think is something the universities should absolutely be disclosing.
Yeah, so when did you start to get an idea that they posed a threat to academic freedom?
So there's been quite a lot of discussion about the Confucius Centres in the United States. There's been some quite in-depth reports done that have looked at the kind of contracts, have managed to get a hold of some of the contracts and the generic templates they use for their relationships with universities. So there were some reports I was reading a couple of years ago now from the US. There was also this fascinating case at Victoria University where it emerged of some evidence that potentially the Confucius Centre had been involved in trying to influence the university to not show a film critical of the Chinese government. So they kind of brought to line this idea that although they claim to be there for political reasons, once you start putting a bunch of people effectively appointed by the Chinese government into universities, the influence that can have subsequently on the university culture and the university's actions can be illiberal in nature.
Yeah, so let's talk about, because this is now becoming a huge issue in the wake of the pro-Hong Kong protests that are taking place at Australian universities. And I want to narrow in on what happened at the University of Queensland. So do you want to talk about the videos that you saw and the response that you saw as well?
Yeah, so there was this, it's probably about 3 or so weeks ago now, where there were these kind of ongoing protests. I think the first one was now a couple months ago, by some pro-Hong Kong students, as well as, all pro-Hong Kong students, but a mixture of Hong Kongers and Australian domestic students who had some concerns about the Chinese government. They organised a protest a couple months ago that was then subsequently told that they couldn't host it at first because it was controversial, and they were allowed to host it. So that was kind of the initial UQ response. And then this really came to public attention a couple of weeks ago when they held a protest that actually then got counter-protested. So there were a few hundred pro-Chinese Communist Party students, as well as a few hundred pro-Hong Kong students. And that, rather than kind of being a peaceful exchange of ideas, turned extraordinarily violent. And some of the footage is truly shocking, with people grabbing each other by the neck, the punch-ons happening on campus, and this kind of extraordinary conflict that you just wouldn't expect to see in normal circumstances at Australian universities, particularly in this context. So that really brought to the national debate and highlighted the fact that there is this debate going on campus. What it kind of showed, and this is part of a bigger narrative of Australia's higher education sector, there are now over 150,000 Chinese international students. It's a huge part, it's about 40% of our $34 billion international student market. And that creates a constituency at universities. For the most part, it's a non-problematic constituency of people who are coming to Australia to learn, to embed themselves in our culture. It's probably actually quite positive in some ways that a large number of Chinese people have an experience of Australia. But it also has this negative undertone in the sense that the Chinese government, and this is what Clive Hamilton showed in his book Silent Invasion, will put a lot of work in to try to influence and ensure that their students in Australia stay aligned with the party line, so they don't get bad ideas in their head in the Chinese ideas about democracy or freedom. And what happened is this extraordinary scene where somehow, very rapidly, a few hundred counter-protesters managed to show up and start literally violently and physically counter-protesting people who are critical of China. It then even became more bizarre when the Chinese Consulate General in Brisbane put out a statement is supporting the violent actions, describing them as patriotic and saying the pro-Hong Kong students had ulterior motives. Now, interestingly enough,
like democracy.
Ulterior motives like democracy and freedom. How shocking! And it just happened that the Chinese Consulate General in Brisbane was an honorary professor at UQ, just recently appointed. So there's quite strong links between the Consulate General and the university. And it was interesting as well then that the university's statements, particularly initially, were pretty weak in terms of supporting its students and supporting free speech. So there seems to be some kind of uncomfortable relationships that have formed within the universities, and whether it's kind of actively or because they're worried about potentially losing some of that international student market, they're willing to have their principles undermined.
So why did UQ decide that they weren't going to support the Hong Kong students and the pro-Hong Kong students with that one?
Well, so what's kind of interesting is university these days claim to have a series of very strong values and proposals that they support, and usually it's around something about diversity and equity. Often you see very little in there about the university's support for democracy and liberalism and freedom. And I think the university basically did a kind of there's good people on both sides kind of response, where they said they expect
straight out of the Trump playbook.
Staff and students. Exactly. Although, admittedly, even Trump was a little bit more on the side of freedom in a lot of incidences. So the statement the university put out said, staff and students are expected to express their views in a lawful and respectful manner and in accordance with the policies and values of the university. It's then worth having a look at exactly what the policies are of the university. So one of the university policies in its discrimination and harassment policy explicitly forbids offensive language based on national or ethnic origin. Now, that could be interpreted by the university's administrators to actually effectively forbid criticizing the actions of the Chinese Communist Party, because criticism of the Chinese government could actually genuinely offend someone based upon their national origin. So it's not like the university's policies are particularly well designed to protect free expression and protect the rights to express a contrarian opinion, even if some people do happen to find that offensive. The UQ is also yet to sign up to the French statement, the French principles on free speech. So I just don't think they have a particularly shining record when it comes to supporting the rights of their students to protest in this case.
Now, when we talk about the University of Queensland and the pro-CCP protest that came out of nowhere, now, is there any sort of formal body that's able to amass students like that, or we understand that's like a grassroots thing?
Well, I suspect it's a little bit more astroturfing than grassroots, but I'm honestly not sure we've quite worked out what caused that sudden surge of people. Presumably, there are some kind of WeChat kind of group chats or something along those lines that have quite a number of students in them, and they were encouraged to turn out. As far as I'm aware, I don't think that the Chinese Student Society or something along those lines formally organised the counter-protest. It just happened to be a few hundred people showed up. So clearly there was some kind of coordination. It's just not clear that there was a formal group behind that.
Yeah, because like here's what I'm saying is like on one side you've got these Confucius Centres which have money from the government in China, not saying you can't speak about Tiananmen Square, you can't speak about Tibet or Taiwan, and then on the other side you've got these students who are more than willing to intimidate people that want to stand up for freedom, stand up for Hong Kong, and the universities can't really, like, they're not putting themselves in a position on either of those fronts to stand up for principles like freedom, principles like democracy and freedom of speech.
I mean, you would think at its core, university literally exists to support free speech, because you need that free speech to have the debate, to do effective research, to teach people, to learn ideas through the conflicts that exist out there when it comes to controversial ideas. Unfortunately, universities don't quite seem to be willing to do that. Another element here that I found quite interesting, was the fact that the Chinese students kind of put their terminology in their claim about being victims as well. They claimed that they were being somehow undermined by the fact that somebody was expressing an alternative viewpoint. And this is suddenly actually where you see a bit of overlap in terms of strategy between a lot of the contemporary left on campus, who will constantly be talking about how they're a victim and how there's all these isms that are going on against them. And then you see this kind of same reaction from some of the Chinese pro-Communist Party students, where they want to be the victims as well. They're kind of buying into this victimology because they know it might grab them some sympathy, to the point where, and there's no better term than useful idiot to describe it, the Australian Campus Greens and the Australian Campus Socialist Alternative put out a statement pro-CCP, pro an autocratic Chinese Communist Party regime, due to a kind of woke sense in which if you criticise the CCP, it must be racist in nature, which is absolutely absurd, but clearly did garner some sympathy as a narrative to play that victim card. But I think it's
if
quite
I stand
bizarre
up against like what China's doing to the Muslims in their nation, I'm suddenly a racist now.
Well, I think so. I think that's the only way to conclude here. If you sign up for the rights of the Uyghurs, you're definitely racist against Chinese. I guess it's just so ridiculous as you say aloud, isn't it? But you've got that kind of woke worldview where you have to try to assess something based upon who you think the bigger oppressors are in any given situation, and that can sometimes lead to very perverse results.
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, what do you reckon is a bigger threat to freedom of speech on campus today? Is it the influence of the CCP, or is it these trigger warnings and safe space movements?
So I think it's kind of a little bit different. I think we're seeing different issues flare up at different times. In my head, I suspect the biggest underlying issue we've got is a lack of diversity of viewpoint, which is to say, more or less putting aside the kind of Chinese Communist Party influence that you can have, and that will be pervasive in some circumstances. You've got the situation where really across subjects and across times, the more or less the vast majority of particularly academics and even the majority of students probably have a pretty consistent kind of liberal left inner city cosmopolitan worldview. And I think that over time has led to an unacceptability on campus of expressing what might be a classical liberal or a conservative or a libertarian worldview quite often. And then I think the interaction of these issues is that if the universities aren't particularly culturally set up to deal with hearing a contrarian libertarian viewpoint, they're not going to be that well set up to hear a contrarian anti-Communist Party viewpoint, of China viewpoint, because if they're buying the same logic about something needing to be censored if it causes offence, they're going to apply that to both what the libertarian says, but also what the Hong Konger says. So we end up with this kind of consistent lack of cultural respect for expressing a different viewpoint. So you get this issue combining together in some ways.
So with the Hong Kong protests in general, for every awesome video we see out of Hong Kong of people taking a stand, there's also a subsequent terrifying video from police brutality and forces massing in Shenzhen. So what do you reckon is going to happen?
Yeah, I'm very worried about what's happening in Hong Kong right now. We've got some extraordinary scenes. I saw a video yesterday of the protesters, I think it was at Hong Kong airport, singing "Can You Hear the People" sing from Les Mis, and trying to have their voice heard. And it's just a beautiful sight to watch people willing to stick up their hand for democracy and freedom. The problem is, realistically, that the power of might is not on their hands. There's this underlying risk, I think, of the Chinese military intervening and trying to turn Hong Kong into some kind of a police state if they think things are getting out of hand against them. And unfortunately, I'm worried that the Chinese government in Beijing just won't compromise and won't provide more democracy to the Hong Kongers. I know that's sadly quite a pessimistic worldview, and I think their protesting is extremely admirable. I'm just not sure how this ends particularly well.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So my last question is going to be, what does it say about universities that they're willing to take the Confucius Centre money, but not also willing to take the Ramsay Foundation money, which was the foundation set up to have a course on Western civilization at campus?
Well, yeah, of course, they're willing to take money from the Chinese government, for the Confucius Centres. There's cases of taking money from Middle Eastern and Gulf countries to fund Islamic studies centres. It just seems like at times the only civilization that can't be studied is Western civilization. Now, of course, there have been some deals reached. We should acknowledge. Was it Wollongong? There's been a deal struck, even at UQ in recent weeks. I think the universities are right to say, well, we have to maintain our institutional autonomy and we have to ensure that this reaches academic standards. I think it just has to be the same principle applied across to all centres and all funding that they accept. And I think there can be a bit of inconsistency, which is worrying at times.
Yeah, I'm great with you on that. All right, Matthew, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we now welcome on to the show a young entrepreneur from Queensland who I really want to speak to because this is an interesting story about government rape. So Henry Spinks, welcome on to the show.
Thanks, James. Appreciate you having me.
All right, sweet. So let's talk about it because the story I heard was that you were setting up a business where it's like Spinks Co. You had a Cadillac and it was going to be like a chauffeur thing for weddings and formals and stuff like that. So is that the idea? What did you want to do with this business?
Yeah, correct. So we got the car sort of 3 years ago, and the idea with the purchase was always to set up a chauffeuring business for school formals, weddings, any sort of special occasion really. And it wasn't until June last year where I got onto my open driver's license where I could apply for a book tyre service license for my car for the purposes of chauffeuring. And in October last year, Department of Main Roads called me up realising they'd made a mistake in the fact that my car was a left-hand drive vehicle and shouldn't have been approved. And as a result, they cancelled my book tyre service licence.
So you get the green light from the government, you go ahead, all right, sweet, we've got the website set up, I'm going to start making money for this Cadillac, and then the government turns around and says, actually, no, that's not the case.
Correct. So, yeah, we spent a lot of time and money on the car and setting up the business. I had the website all good to go and a lot of other promotional bits and pieces. And, I'd done like a formal or two in that short space of time, just getting my feet off the ground. And, in October, got an unfortunate phone call and basically they said you need to suspend operations immediately and until further notice. And, yeah.
But when I was on the Queensland website, I saw that left-hand drive vehicles are actually legal in Queensland. If there is a way you can drive left-handed car vehicles in Queensland, it helps tourists get around and stuff like that. So why were you singled out for? Okay, you can't make money off this.
Okay, so you can't. Correct. You can drive a left-hand drive vehicle in Queensland, like provided it's 30 years old, just for general use. But for the specific purposes of weddings, formals, which all falls under the book tyre service licence, which is more or less the same as Uber, unless you held a limousine licence way back in 2016 and have since retained it, you can no longer provide these sort of services with a classic American car that's left-hand drive.
So there's absolutely no way a young person such as yourself or someone that just wants to get into the business can get into the business because they've said, all right, 2016, that's our cutoff date, no more new people.
Correct. That's exactly right. And I've been disputing it for a long time now. Actually, a couple months ago, I had a QCAT mediation with some of the managers from Department of Main Roads, and we spoke for 3 hours trying to dig through any piece of legislation that might have some sort of loophole or provide alternatives for people like myself. And at this point in time, there is currently no alternative whatsoever. It's completely ruled out.
Yeah, this is like really sad for me because this is, you're trying to get a business off. You love the Cadillac. It's a beautiful looking car. I can imagine that there's a lot of people out there who would love to have the Cadillac drive them to the formal or drive them to a wedding, and you can't get ahead. Like, has there been any sort of indication from any government source that they might think about changing these laws? Yeah,
they did mention that because of the sort of number of people they've affected. And even though it is a relatively small industry, a sort of niche market, as you say, it's still something really cool to do on a special occasion. And I think they've come down and cracked down hard on all these left-hand drive cars for no reason. It's not as though an incident happened or anything along those lines. So they did say, yes, that it was under review. However, there is absolutely no indication as to when they'll make any changes to it.
Yeah. And so, like, for you as a young entrepreneur, someone that wants to get ahead in the game, like, what is your take out from the whole experience? I mean, you're in front of people talking for 3 hours. You're up against all this government red tape. Like, I mean, surely this sort of tells you, hey, this is going to be a tough thing if I want to start making money off these cars.
Oh, correct. It was just such a lengthy process, even to get to the stage of having all the applications approved. Like, I needed to submit, I think it was 3 separate applications, not just for the car, but to be able to provide those services under the business name, and you need an industry authority and all sorts of bits and pieces. Had to go get medicals just to be able to submit the applications. And then once they all went through, I thought, that'd be the end of it. But it's not an easy thing to get into, and it's incredibly frustrating the amount of hoops you have to jump through for such a seemingly simple business idea.
Yeah, this is just the thing. And like the IPA finds this stuff with all of our red tape work is that the people that get hurt the most is always going to be people that are trying to take a risk, trying to start a new business. And yeah, someone such as yourself is like, I really love this car. I want other people to experience the same joys I have this car. I mean, the government should be in the business of saying, all right, sweet, how do we help you out with that? But instead it just turns around and says, okay, here's 500 hoops you're going to have to jump through. And also we cut you off in 2016, so don't even bother. I mean, that's a really, it's such an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. So is there anything listeners who might want to help out or might want to get involved with the business in some way? Is there anything they can do?
Oh, mate, to be honest, at this point in time, I'm not entirely sure. The most people could do out there is just sort of keep demanding, interest in left-hand drive cars, so we can sort of turn around and say to any governing bodies, hey, look, people are still dead keen to be able to have an experience like this. Why have you completely taken it away and ruled it out? So, yeah.
Absolutely. Is there a Facebook page people can like the page and maybe if it turns around they can book the car out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The Facebook page is Spinks Co Classic, and it's the same on Instagram as well. So if anyone wants to check it out, it's been a bit dead there for a long time now, but that's my page. And if anything changes, they'll be sure to know.
All right, sweet. Henry, thanks so much for calling in. Incredible story. Really appreciate it. And good luck.
My pleasure, James. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Matthew Lesh and Henry Spinks for those interviews. Really interesting stuff. So yeah, make sure you're heading over to Henry's Facebook page if you want to help out the cause, maybe read a bit more about it because, great kid, great interview, and we want to do everything we can to help him out with that. All right, let's run through some stories that have made us laugh this week, and then we'll head over to the quiz. So I want to start with this one, and it's not so much makes me laugh, it makes me exceedingly angry, I think would be the word.
It's a frustrating one.
So there's a movie that was about to come out called The Hunt, and it's from the people that brought us The Purge and Get Out, pretty popular movies.
Big movies.
Yeah, big movies with a constant theme of you've got a very marginalized group in society who overthrow people that are doing them wrong. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to do something different with this one. It was originally going to be called Red State, Blue State, but basically the idea was the characters of the film were going to be people that would have voted for Trump. They were in flyover country in the USA, and they're being hunted by liberal elites, and they go back and fight them off. And that was obviously clear from the trailer. But unfortunately to Fox News and to Donald Trump, this has been completely missed because I think it's 21 different segments on Fox News have been aired talking about how this film glorifies the killing of Republicans and it shouldn't be aired because of this. And then Donald Trump says this is the stuff that incites violence. We can't have this movie coming out. And now the producers have said, okay, we're not releasing the movie. That movie will never come out.
Very disappointing.
Because we can't have nice things.
It looks really good.
Yeah, it looked like
great actors.
Yes, I think I can't remember. Hilary Swank was one of them. But anyway, we talk about outrage culture on the left, and we talked about Sarah Silverman earlier. But this is outrage culture on the right, where you are so blind to irony, and you're so the jukes are so up looking for a fight that something like this comes along, and you think that's the enemy. I'm going to get outraged about that, and suddenly it's shut down. It's on both sides now.
they have like gotten themselves. They've fooled themselves.
Yeah. Like, I can see the movie getting delayed in the wake of El Paso and Dayton. I completely get that. But to the scrapping the day after Trump tweets about it, it's like there's a clear link between Trump and Fox News talking about this movie and it getting pulled.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we can't have nice things anymore.
Not
because
at all.
outrage culture on both sides. Anyway, that's
disappointing.
That's my rant. I'm done. I've channeled the Pete Get Angry rant. So that's that. All right, Adam, let's lighten up the mood with a bit of Caroline Lucas.
All right. Well, Caroline Lucas, she's the Green MP in the British Parliament, and she called for an all-female cabinet to block Brexit. First time ever.
Very brave stand.
Very brave stand.
Yeah, can't trust men to do it. Got to be all female.
Yeah, so she was really going out on a limb here. And now she's been slammed because while she might have all women, she doesn't have any black women.
Wow.
So
Missed that one.
diverse, but not diverse enough.
Yeah.
Big swing and a miss.
I love the woke Olympics like this. Like, oh, you think you've made a brave stand? Here's my even braver stand.
Yeah,
It's going
exactly.
to be louder and more aggressive than your one.
And I'd like to point out that a cabinet's only so big,
Yeah.
you can't have everyone in it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we don't have, this ethnicity. It's just going to keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there will be one group that won't be
Yeah,
represented.
there's going to have to be.
Yeah, exactly. Just woke Olympic stuff. I mean, honestly, keep it coming because it's always going to be good. All right, that is it for the stuff. Well, actually, so the next thing I want to do, so we got this really fun competition happening with Generation Liberty, which is all the stuff we do with young people. So if you're not already a fan of the Generation Liberty Facebook page, head over, like the page. So basically, Generation Liberty have these stubby holders, which is absolutely awesome. So you've got Thomas Sowell, Margaret Thatcher, and Sir George Reid already. They've got quotes as well. You might have seen, we put on Instagram photos with Nigel Farage having them, Raheem Kassam having them over at CPAC. They got a feature on Sky News as well. So, you can go to the Facebook page right now, the IPA's Facebook page. You can go to Generation Liberty's Facebook page, or you can go to the Institute of Public Affairs on Instagram. We're running this really cool competition. If you name the person you think should be the fourth Generation Liberty stubby holder and what quote you'd use. And the best answer we say is going to get all three for free. Really cool stubby holder. So yeah, make sure you're heading over to the Facebook pages or Instagram, whichever way you want to connect with us and get in on the competition. Now, Adam, that is it for your time with the podcast. Well, not,
I'm done.
In this seat. Like,
In
we want
this
to
seat.
involve you with a few other things, but in Peter Gregory's
Pretending to be
absence-
Pete.
Yeah, exactly. Pretending to be Pete, which you're doing a much better job than Pete actually does at being Pete. So have you learned anything? Well, accurate. So with Pete coming back next week, he'll be wanting his chair back, even if I don't want to give it to him. But yeah, any reflections you want to have on your couple weeks here, or do you want to maybe something you've learned?
Well, I've actually come to the conclusion. I think this is easier than you guys make it look.
It is.
Yeah.
Pete and I put up a big song and dance every week about how hard the podcast is.
Yeah, no.
But Adam's saying...
All you have to do, roll in, have a chat. It's easy.
In my defense, I do give you a pretty detailed note plan.
True. Yeah, you do fill me in very thoroughly.
All right, sweet. Adam, it's been absolutely awesome having you. So, we're going to have Pete back next week. Make sure everyone's going and checking out So Fox. Very cool band. I know a lot of our listeners are writing in saying how much they're liking the songs that we've been playing of yours.
Thanks, guys.
And, like them on Facebook so you can keep up to date with gigs. So, Adam, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
And after this brief interlude, we're going to be coming back with the IPA quiz. Oh, Young IPA podcast quiz. All right, welcome back to Hey, What Did We Miss? The Young IPA quiz. We've now got intro music, which I'm really loving. So what this is, for people that haven't heard the show before, so basically weekly quiz. We've got two IPA staff members here with us now. We've got returning champion, Director of Policy, Gideon Rozner.
Great to be here.
Welcome back. And then we've got National Manager of our Generation Liberty program, Renee Gorman. Renee, welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, you've just been in America, so you're a bit worried that you're behind the eight ball here, so you also want to work off a handicap. So, Gideon, do you have any trash talk that you want to get out of the way early?
No, I saved my trash talking for the water cooler.
All right, fantastic. All right, sorry. What this is, weekly quiz. So 1 point for each answer. I've got 9 questions here and a who am I. We'll start off right now. We all good?
Yep.
So for buzzers, we're just going to get you to say your first name. So
Yep.
let's get a quick buzzer check.
Gideon.
Renee.
Cool, I can do that. All right, sorry. Question 1. According to our latest report, Reg Data Australia, how many regulatory restrictions in federal law and regulations were there as of 2015? This was in the Australian this morning.
Yeah, I should really know that.
You really should
I
know
really
that.
should, yeah.
Okay, that's very concerning for both of you. That's got to be, everyone needs to know that here at the IPA. It is 95,000 as of 2015,
All right,
which
all
is an
good to know.
explosion.
You've saved me reading the Oz today.
There we go. All right, sorry. Question 2. All right, so it's still 0-all draw. Renee, everything to play for. Gideon, everything to lose. Question 2. Which US institution did we do the report with?
Renee.
Renee.
George Mason University.
Dang. Renee,
Not specific enough.
Oh, all right.
More
challenge.
detail. No, you can have a.
She's already got the point. If you want to flex on us and say what centre it
you should have
is.
said which specific centre at the George Mason University. Oh.
All right, Gideon, come on, flex away.
The Makeda Centre at
There
George
we go.
Mason.
Oh, yes,
Renee
I knew
still
that.
gets the point. Renee
Yep.
still gets the point. But Gideon, nice flex.
Okay.
All right, so what date does Boris Johnson promise to bring in Brexit
Gideon.
by? Oh, that was...
That was me.
That
Come
was
on.
oh, I think I've got to give it to Renee.
Yeah,
that
that's
was so
Renee's.
close. She got the R out.
October 31st.
That is
Halloween.
correct. 2-0. All right, 2-0. All right.
Well, this is too close for comfort. I don't like this.
What percentage of Brits would be okay suspending Parliament to get through Brexit? Points if you get it within the nearest 5%.
Renee.
Renee.
60%.
And what would your guess be? Closest to the mark is going to get the point.
70%.
All right, so Renee, it's 52. But isn't that wild? Like,
I'm
that is a
going
lot of
down.
people that'd be okay. Like, Parliament, don't need it. As long as we get
Yeah,
Brexit,
I guess
who cares?
70% of people suspending Parliament would
Yeah,
be. So it's 52. And ironic, that's the number of people who. That's the proportion who voted for Brexit.
Yeah, so
Brexit
they still
meant
want it,
breakfast.
and they want it even more.
Brexit meant Brexit.
All right, so...
Breakfast is a really good slogan.
Okay, this is why neither of you
Find
were
a
appointed to
cafe.
the Brexit marketing team, all right? This is terrible, and I'm less inclined to vote for Brexit or have breakfast. All right, sorry, question, what are we up to? 5. All right, David Attenborough, friend of the show, I guess. David Attenborough ripped off the name of which IPA book
Gideon.
for his new...
Climate change the
He
facts.
did indeed. He's got a new documentary coming out called Climate Change the
That
Facts.
is a trademark infringement.
I think so. If he
Maybe.
really...
If we trademarked it.
I don't know. I don't really know trademark law, but if they want real facts, they know where to go. All right, so Gideon, you're back on the board. All right, so question 6. Which word caused CNN host Chris Cuomo
Gideon.
to flip out on a random member of the public
Gideon.
at a restaurant?
Fredo.
Fredo, correct.
Fredo.
Not...
Haven't you heard that one?
Well, Fredo,
No.
I think, would be the official pronouncement. But
Okay.
like basically the idiot brother from the Godfather series. But anyway, someone called Chris Cuomo that in a restaurant. He flipped out. He said it was like a, it's
The
a
N-word.
racist term. Yeah. Which I don't think it is, but I'm not.
I've never heard it before, but I'm not a Fredo myself or
Yeah,
an
exactly.
F-word myself.
You've never betrayed the family,
No.
as Fredo did in. All right, sorry.
not that family.
3-2. Question 7. Name the new Quentin Tarantino film coming out this week.
Renee.
Renee.
The American Dream.
No.
Or no, Hollywood something.
Gideon, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Dang.
Oh, damn it. I gave
got
it to you.
Yeah, got the buzzwords out.
You lose, Renee.
So 3-all, and we're coming into the final 3 questions. So this is getting spicy. All right, question 8. Which friend of this podcast, Young IPA podcast, which person who has sat with us was on Dave Rubin's show this week?
Renee.
No,
Dennis Prager.
not Dennis Prager.
Couldn't tell you.
All right, it's Brendan O'Neill. Sorry.
Ah.
Go
Very good
back to
friend of
listen
the-
to...
Hello to
IPA.
Brendan.
Yeah, hello to Brendan, friend of the podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I saw him in the US.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
How was that?
Yeah, I saw him at Freedom Fest in Vegas, and he seemed very relieved to be able to talk to someone who wasn't American,
Oh, really?
and was very complimentary of the work that the IPA does, and made sure I sent a message back home about how much he loves us.
Oh, awesome. Well, Brendan,
And we
big
love
fan.
him.
Yeah, big fan. All right, and to make sure we have at least one leader before we get into the Who Am I, who won the first Ashes test?
Gideon.
Gideon.
It was Australia.
It was
wasn't
indeed.
I don't
Sorry.
even follow the cricket, but
Gideon,
I picked it up by osmosis from social media.
it's been everywhere.
Okay.
And
Yeah, well, that's about right.
So, Gideon, we go into the Who Am I with Gideon on a very narrow 4-3 lead. So, who am I? For 5 points, I was born on the 13th of May, 1968. You will lose a point for an incorrect answer. So does anyone want to get a silo off now? All right, so it's going over to 4. I entered Parliament in 2007. Mm-hmm. For people listening and not watching on YouTube, for people listening, the look of intensity, these two want to win this.
I'm fine.
These two
I'm in it to win
want
it.
to win this. All right.
There's honour on the line.
So
All
for
right,
3
next.
points, my first ministry was Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Renee. ScoMo?
ScoMo it is.
Yes!
Renee takes it. All right, so we have a new champion. Renee, fresh off the plane from the US, has bested Gideon Rozner. So Gideon, thank you for playing. Renee, congratulations. You will have to defend your title next quiz. So looking forward to that. And that is it for the Young IPA podcast this week. So thank you to Matthew Lesh, thank you to Henry Spinks, and thanks again to Adam. It's been so good having him on the show for the last 3 weeks. Pete is back next week, and thank you to Gideon, and thank you to Renee. All right, see you guys next week.